We're on Zoom.
Mr. Wagner is not online right now. There is no one online right now, actually. So,
Okay, well, that makes it easy. So with that, we'll rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And let's see, to be able to do, is there any requests for residents to speak to the board?
yes, there is one request this evening.
Okay,
Our only speaker is Ronnie Jevons. And I don't have the clock up, so I will just keep track of it on my phone if that's okay.
Just keep it short. I'm
Okay.
usually not long-winded. Good evening. My name is Ronnie Jevons. I'm a taxpayer and parent of 2 third graders in the district. First, I'd like to request that presentations and proposed changes to policies be posted in their entirety on the agenda prior to them being presented, which is something some districts do. It would enable community members to ensure their comments are relevant to what will be discussed rather than guessing at the content. Tonight, I'm hoping my comments about the high school are still relevant to whatever new information KCBA will be presenting. During KCBA's last presentation, I was very impressed with option C. It appears to get us what we need as a district without incurring the expense of an entirely new build. I love that we can keep the PAC, which I've heard is amazing, and update Buchanan rather than destroying a perfectly good building just in need of some updates. I know finances are extraordinarily tight, as highlighted by conversations around the teacher contract and the many finance committee meetings I've attended. I'm concerned in an attempt to save money, the board will go with options A or B, which in my mind are a significant waste of taxpayer money. Roughly $131 to $192 million would be spent, with a sizable chunk of it being used to repair Franklin, knowing it will need to be replaced within 25 years. That large expense also won't get us the additional space the feasibility study clearly illustrates incoming classes will need. With such a large expenditure, I'm hoping the money will be used to provide an environment for our students that meet their learning needs now and in the coming years, and helps to maintain our standing as a highly desirable district. I'd like to see our home values hold strong and ideally rise. Hempfield must be an educational leader. We can't be a leader with an overcrowded building. I understand option C is more costly, and the board may need to seek creative financial solutions to fund the project, but I believe it to be the most fiscally responsible long-term. I have faith in this board to figure out a financial solution to ensure our students get a renovated, modern, larger high school that will serve them well into the future. Thank you.
thank you. Moving on, I assume for the update, we need the architect, so we'll go on to, I believe we could do B.
Yep, he's projected around 520, 525.
Okay, so we'll move on to part B, the update on the school facilities grant, which I believe is Mrs. Hall
Me.
or,
Me.
okay, this is
Yeah.
James, thank you.
So I just wanted to bring to all of your attention that we've talked about the DCED grant in the past, that we had applied for it. The grants have been awarded, and we have been awarded $1.5 million for the grant that we had applied for. If you recall, this grant was for the roofs at Landisville Middle School and Landisville Primary Center. So we'll move on with the next steps of this in the procurement process of this grant. So just wanted to make you all aware that we were awarded. There were a number of schools that had applied for grants and did not receive anything. So I think we're quite fortunate that we did receive some money for this. So
Remind me, Mrs. James, was that the amount we requested? I thought it was 3 million and change, but I don't remember.
yeah, it
We
was
requested probably close to 4 million. Nobody got anywhere near that. They did
Okay.
more partial grants than
So we
they
got-
did full grants.
Got about half or less. Okay, thank you.
Thank you to everyone who's
How
here.
much did we get?
1.5 million.
1.5, thank you.
Yes. And thank you to everyone who's here who was part of that, because I know some of the people in the audience were part of getting that and working with you.
Any other
I hate to
questions?
say this, but I couldn't hear.
I was just saying thank you to the people who are here, who were a part of that in the audience, and with Mrs. James, who worked on that grant and the administration. Thank you.
Any other questions before we move on?
So
Okay,
I have one question. So will repairs then begin immediately, or you have
No.
to put out more bids?
No,
or
we have to,
what's
we
the
have to go
process
through a
now?
procurement process.
And how long will that usually, how long does that usually take? I don't remember.
It may not be the procurement process that takes that long, but by the time we get through that, then we're gonna be into winter and they won't be able
And
to.
so we wait
Right,
until,
right,
until.
Right,
nice
so
weather.
ideally, we'd like to start
Spring.
projects next spring.
Spring, thank
Mhm.
you.
Summer, yes.
and if I remember correctly, this was designed to cover the cost of the roofs for the middle school and LPC,
Yep.
which probably covers half of one of the roofs approximately, which is still better than.
Yeah, I'll keep you posted as we go
Right.
through the whole process.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions with that? Mr. Maris, when you're ready, I'll let you know where we're at and you can.
Yeah, thank you.
I'll move on with the next one. The Lancaster Area Sewer Authority. And that's Mrs. James again.
Yes.
I clicked this time, so I know it's you.
So I just wanted to make all of you aware, you may see some digging in the next few weeks happening here on the Landisville campus. I was notified last week by LASA that they are starting they also got a grant of their own to replace some of the water mains and things like that. I think there's the map. This is the map that we were given by the contractor of the route that's going to be taken for the replacements. You can see, excuse me, you can see on there, they're going to start over in Salunga and then it's going to wind down through neighborhoods and so forth. It will come out on the side of Buchanan, the Buchanan side of the high school from the side neighborhood. It will come down the grass area next to the parking lot in the Buchanan side. And then it's going to cross over the entrance to the Buchanan side of the building. We're going to work closely with them. Our hope is that we'll have something done or they'll do that part of it at least during off-school hours, but I can't promise anything at this point. It will then go down a bit of Kaufman Road. It will cross over Kaufman and then we'll go down past some of our fields. From what I'm looking at right now on the map and what we've had meetings, I've met with them. They're going to possibly go through a corner of the softball field, but it's not going to disrupt. If it disrupts any of the fields, it may disrupt just a little bit of the JV softball field. Unfortunately, a part that I'm not happy about is this is going to go through a corner of the roundabout parking lot at the old LIC. So they have assured me they will do their best to disturb as little as possible, but I already know it's going to happen. So I voiced my displeasure with that part of it, but there's not much we can do about it because it's also going to go across Church Street. So
What is the time frame for the beginning to end of all?
they're actually starting the project.
Some of it already.
Yep, they're already starting the project. And so they're anticipating arrival on our campus late November, beginning of December, but they said they would keep me updated as they progress through this. So
I'm looking at the map, but none of our, this isn't going to affect any of our asphalt parking lot areas. It's like, so
Yep.
they're all gonna,
yeah, that's what I was referring to as the old LIC, where the old LIC circle was.
That's the only part.
That's the only
Say
part
the
of the
only part.
parking of that parking lot, the new, that's just been redone. It is going to
Mhm.
come across the entrance of the Buchanan side of the high school. So that is another really big concern just in the timing for that, because that is our in for buses. So that could cause a bit of a headache.
And when they're all finished, they'll like, obviously they're gonna put the dirt back, but are they gonna put the new asphalt down or?
They are, but they're not good because of timing. They're not going to be able to put down a finish coat when they finish. They're going to have to come back in the spring once it's warm enough to be able to put down a finished coat.
Okay, thanks.
Just one question. Do they have, is this some existing easements that they have?
Yes,
It is. Okay, thank you.
yeah, they made that very clear to me.
No. Well, I mean, I'm just, it's a question worth asking.
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I assume that they did, but want to make sure. If not, we're entitled to something, but since they do, we're not.
Any other questions? Mr. Maris, I'll let you take over your,
Okay, so looks like we're doing TCBA still not here, so we'll go to the paging system update.
Mr. Maris, could you use the microphone, please?
Thank you, Mr. Grant. Let's go ahead with the paging system update at LMS and LPC. Mr. Graham's going to give us an update.
Also, just for the minutes, Mr. Wagner is online at this point, so.
Hello, everyone.
We don't really have a presentation since we had done many on paging systems previously. I noted important news that after the phase one projects were approved at the meeting last month, we resubmitted in here the updated proposals, or excuse me, quotes for paging systems at LMS and LPC to get work started on both of those. The projection would be that we would be able to get LMS replaced over Christmas break still, and LPC at some point thereafter, given that both systems are now easily at the end of their life and starting to see some same signs of failure that we saw at the high school earlier last year.
Any questions? So I guess we'll move into the Finance Committee meeting since KCBA is still not here. Is that the plan?
We can do that.
Mr. Waldman.
All right, the first thing we have on the agenda is item 4A.
Mr. Walker.
The first thing we have on the agenda is item 4A, and it's going to be a budget update from Mrs. Hall.
Project. So it feels like we just finished the last budget, but we're back into the budget planning again. And I just tonight want to share a timeline, very preliminary, of what we're doing and what to expect throughout the process. Next slide. Obviously, September has passed, and things that we needed to know were what were the Act 1 index and what was our adjusted. So the Act 1 index base is 4, and our adjusted for Hempfield is 4.8%. Sorry, go back. Also for October, the business office does a determination of building expense allocations for things like supplies to make sure that's an even spread based on student count. And we also receive our healthcare premiums for the next year, which unfortunately those were up 15.6%. So that's a factor we have to take into consideration when we're doing this year's budget. So going forward, next slide. So in November, we're going to have all of our building and department line items entered by all of our coordinators and principals and department heads. At the same time, any requests for additional personnel will be due to us for review. And then at the November 26th Finance Committee meeting, we need to talk about the intent to adopt the accelerated budget opt-out resolution, which just means that we are agreeing to not go above the index, the adjusted index for our tax increase. So I'll need direction. If that is not what we do, this changes the entire timeline that I'm presenting, but I'm just going to assume we're doing that. We've done it for the last few years. So that's what our timeline is built on, but we'll have that discussion next month in Finance Committee. For December, if we're going to accept the opt-out resolution, we'll approve it there. We have to submit our Sterling tax credit, which is a credit for any of our residents who work in the city of Philadelphia and pay credit or taxes on those wages. We will have the preliminary budget presentation in December based upon the expenses that we've rolled up and the very, very early revenue projections. And then we'll have to get out our homestead farmstead application instructions by the end of the year, of the calendar year. Next slide. Just like last year in January, we will start in committee meetings presenting first with revenue, and then we'll move on to expenses in February. And then for March, we'll roll it all together and do a final general fund budget presentation, which will have all of the expenses, revenues, everything rolled together. So then we can then move on to the next slide to talk about what the final tax increase will be, if any. So that's just to give you an idea how that's going to work. Then we will adopt the resolution to advertise the final budget, which we're required to do by the state. We'll make it out for public inspection and then publish notice of our intent to adopt it on June 10th. Next slide. June 10th is when we have to adopt the budget so we can have it submitted back to PDE by June 30th. So just to give you an idea of what that's going to look like. Also, we've got some updated information from the IFO about what the forecast is for the Act One index. It's changed just a little bit from the last time I presented it. So just to give you an idea of what it should look like, they were right on for 25-26. They had predicted it would be 4%. And then I took our current aid ratio to adjust it for our out years. So you can see it's starting to go down and then sort of flattens out at the end of the 5 years. Next slide. That lends into this chart, which we've gone over in previous meetings, and I just picked 2 examples. Obviously, once we hear from KCBA, we may want to look at some other ones, but what that would look like if we were going to build in over the next 4 years, debt service for any high school project. So this is a chart we'll continue to update or refine, or if there's some, we're getting some movement around one particular option, I'll update that. And we also have some options to do this over 5 years. Oh, sorry.
Mrs. Hall?
Yes.
So as I'm looking at this, overlaying the borrowing expense with other anticipated expenses, can you give me a ballpark? What percentage of a tax increase, how can I phrase this clearly? For each 1% that we would increase compensation for administration and support staff, what would the flow through be to the tax increase?
Yeah, I'll have to get back to you. I don't have that number. I don't have it. in my
Okay,
head,
so
that.
let me
I
ask
can
you
get
a
it to
different
you.
way. Hypothetically, we increase administration and support staff compensation by 3%. Approximately what type of tax increase would that be?
No, I understood that. I would need to know the total wages to do that for you, and I don't have total wages for those groups right now. We have total wages for the whole district, but I said I have total wages for the whole district. We'd have to break it down by group. I just don't have that in front of me. I'd
Okay.
be happy to get it for you though.
I'd appreciate that.
Yep, you got it. Other questions on this particular chart? Okay. Do you have questions?
Any other questions or comments from Mrs. Hall? Is it all right if we finish out the finance portion of this prior to moving to KCBA? It shouldn't take too long. The next item on there is 4B, and that's contracts. So if you open up, you'll see that there are a number of contracts listed here. They will be on for the November 12th approval if nothing changes after discussion tonight. So you can see that the R means it's a renewal, the N means it's new, and the Y and the N are under the budgeted or not budgeted. So if you've had a chance to review these, if you haven't, take a few minutes. And does anybody have any questions about any of these?
Excuse me, I had a question. There was one last slide in Mrs. Hall's presentation that we didn't see. I don't know if it was.
Should be on your, in your
I mean,
presentation.
just publicly.
I think this was the last one. It was just to give you an idea of how the Act One index has trended over the last 7-8 years and what the tax.
And it shows where our tax increase is. And since you brought that up, I'll just highlight for anybody listening and for this board that about the average that we've raised taxes over the last 3 years has been 3.17%. And that's rounded up slightly. So we've raised taxes to this community 3.17% on average over the last 3 years. Any other questions?
I had a question on the contracts, if we're moving beyond.
Yeah, we're into the contracts.
On one of the IU contracts, I believe it's the first one in the list. Just questioning, without naming names, it appears that there's a student receiving services there from another public school, another elementary public school, and I wasn't sure where that comes into play.
Pull the mic closer. I can't hear you, Judy.
It was a question about this IU contract for English language development services. And I'm just noticing the list of students who would be getting those particular services. And I see the Hempfield student and I see others that are in placements, but the one of them looks like another public elementary school. So I wasn't sure where that one comes into play?
They should be for non-publics in our attendance area, supporting students in those placements. I can.
Yeah, just
if you want
item
to talk after, I can
B2,
Identify which one.
1B2, if you want to look at that.
Piggybacking on that, Dr. Dandridge, there's a non-budgeted expense of $110 per hour, according to the summary sheet here. First of all, why English language development, unless this was an unanticipated student need?
So we have been providing these services with our staff in past years. So with contracting with the IU, we were able to free up our staff to teach other classes in Hempfield. So at the cost that we were getting through the IU, we thought it was a good use of the resources for the few students that we're supporting. So we do have to provide screening services for those students in the non-pubs. And then typically consult with their staff and their buildings on additional services beyond that.
And you're going to make this work within the larger budget framework as opposed to looking for new dollars.
Correct.
Okay. What's wrong?
So if you have to do that, what does that mean? We don't get? Unless I misunderstood what you were saying. You said you're finding dollars for this in your existing budget. So what does that mean? You would be cutting, or what we wouldn't be?
It's
What's the
freeing up
impact
this.
on what we're providing to our students, I guess.
Yeah, it's freeing up the staff that we had used previously to do this, who would once a week have to go out to schools to be able to now provide services for our students in both. There was one in the elementary and one in the high school previously that what we've done.
So this isn't it's gonna help our students, not.
Yes. Yes.
And sometimes there are students in IU programming in other schools that also get the support and services that we have to provide.
Okay, yeah,
We have fair share, so we have students from other districts as well as part of IU programs in our schools.
Got it.
Even though they're IU programming.
Thank you.
Okay, maybe I'm missing something here, but at the risk of asking the same question that Mrs. Brady just did, why are we paying for a student from an elementary school in another district, a private school, and 2 private schools? They're not our students.
They are.
So we have a duty to provide equitable services for students that go to non-publics in our attendance area. I will have to get back to you.
Where is Bear Creek Elementary? That's in another district, isn't it?
Let me find out where those students exactly are coming from and why those dollars are going to those students. I can get that information.
Okay.
At the expense of beating a dead horse with this, I do have a question. Is there a reason this wasn't budgeted, Dr. Dandridge? Because it doesn't sound like something that was an emergency, and it sounds like something that's been in the works. I'm a little disappointed to see that it wasn't part of the budget. And whenever I hear we're just going to find the money, that raises a lot of red flags for me. Or we just redeployed our teachers somewhere else. So what is the true impact of this, and why wasn't it part of our budget?
Yeah, when we were looking at how to schedule this coming summer, it was an idea that came up that we started working on with the IU. It did take us a little time to actually get the cost of what their contracted services would look like. But given the minimal costs that we anticipate needing to provide to these students, we thought that we could find those funds in what we currently had for this year. And then going forward, certainly it'll be, if we're pleased with those services, then that's something that we'll be budgeting for next year's budget.
I might be missing this, but how long is the contract for that there? Is it 1 year?
Yeah, just for this year.
Okay. As long as it's only 1 year.
It is. Yeah.
I have another question, and it goes back to, I'm sorry, I missed it when we were doing the budget slides in the November where it's like personnel request.
Ms. Johnson, can you get close to the mic? I can't hear you.
We are not doing well tonight with speaking loudly. In November, we're supposed to, the personnel requests are going to be submitted. Will what are we looking at for that? Do you already kind of know how many more people we're gonna need, whether it's teachers or shared responsibilities with the IU13? Do we have any idea about what's
We have
anticipated?
projections and ballparks. That's all we can kind of work off of at this time of the year. And then
Mhm.
as we go through the budget process, that'll continue to be refined. There's also kind of those asks that come in, whether it's looking at caseloads of special education,
Mhm.
case managers, as well as other programming through the district that we hear from people saying, it'd be great if we could have fill in the blank. And so we look at all of that and then try and figure out in the larger picture, what can work and what can't in the current budget. And then as we work through the revenue and expense side of the budget, then we'll be bringing those things that can't work to see, is it possible to get it? Depending on what the actual cost will be.
In this, in addition, to teaching staff, this would also be support staff, administrative staff,
Yep.
staff within our offices.
Yep.
And do we have any shortfalls right now in staffing
There are still
across the
positions-
board?
There are still areas that we are still looking for individuals to try and fill positions.
Mhm.
We're hearing the job fairs that we're doing are working.
Sure.
We're getting individuals coming in, which is great. But there's still open positions.
And that's for within this support staff.
And some in the teaching that the team is working through to try and get
And then
creative
we
as to how
talked
to
about
cover.
one of those.
Correct.
I'm aware of it, one of those.
Yeah.
Okay,
Even administratively too.
we can always use more staff.
Yep.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions regarding these contracts? They will be on the November 12th, so if you have concerns or questions, please ask them now. All right, hearing none, we'll move on to the one action item that we have, which is the approval of the contract spreadsheet that you'll see attached. And there's 3 items on there. So I'm going to need a motion to approve those contracts.
I have a point of order first. Why are we approving something that comes from the Hempfield Foundation? They have independent budgetary authority, do they not? Or are they the Mobile Ed Productions? It says Hempfield Foundation grant. So if they're paying for it, why are we approving it?
So we already approved, it's a 2-day thing. We already approved the first day. We didn't realize the second day was a second contract. That's why it got put on. I mean, we typically pay for it and then they give us the money, but we're the ones agreeing to the terms and
Right.
conditions of the contract.
It's what?
We're the ones agreeing to the terms and conditions of the contract, even though we're getting the funding from the foundation. It's still our contract.
Okay. Thank you.
That's a good question, though. Any questions about those 3 items on there? And if not, I need a motion and a second.
So moved.
Second.
All right, having a motion and a second, are there any comments or questions? All right, all in favor?
In favor.
Okay, 9-0. Thank you. And that concludes the finance committee meeting.
So we'll go ahead and move to our original agenda item for buildings and grounds. Update from KCBA. Mike, if you want to come on up.
Good evening, everybody. Apologize for the late arrival there on traveling, doing all well on 222, and then everything just stopped. So it took some back roads and some beautiful scenery on the 45 additional minutes we put together. So thank you guys for having us again tonight. We had sent ahead of time just kind of a brief overview, and happy to dive into any more details. If you want to launch the PDF there you go, perfect. One of the things we had set early on, if you want to head to the next slide there, was kind of again our general action plan. We had done our listening over the summer, and this is us, midway through the kind of lead part of the study. We had kind of addressed with everybody 4 different options, the concepts of last month. Tonight was the night that we wanted to field some questions and see if there's some direction from you on one of those 4 options, or, hybrids in between, certainly. And then look to come back on the 26th with a bit of a presentation to the community of, here's what was decided, here's what the schedule would be, and here's what the budget is. And look to see if there's approval from the board to move ahead with that. So if you move to the next slide there, as we said, we've been meeting bi-weekly with Mr. Bromsman and his staff, the administration staff for since July. Pretty frequently going over existing conditions, and many, many different options. We had kind of focused on one before that was a little bit of a expansion of the existing building option. And since the last month, we've been looking a little bit more at the replaced Franklin portion of the building option. So again, we're here tonight to kind of look at if there's a direction from you guys to consider moving forward with. So if you head to the next one.
So, Mr. Kelly, to be clear, are you asking tonight, you're asking us to decide which of the 3 options you're going to pursue?
We'd like to hear from you to see if there is one in particular that wants further advancement. What we were hoping to do in the schedule was we're kind of coming to the end of that study. Now, again, for us, we never stop. We'll keep looking at options until, the board has a 100% definitive answer and what they would like to do. But the goal of tonight is to say, between these 4, this one we'd like you to pursue a little bit further, show up what it looks like, what's the outside look like. Let's advance that a little bit further through a bit of a bit more focused concept design, so that we can come back next month with, this is what it would look like. You'll kind of see some almost completed images tonight. But we would like, if there is consensus, a little bit of a direction to say, all right, of these 4, based on the educational outcome, the budget, and some other factors, this is where we think we want to go.
I would like to suggest that from my end, that we take a little more time, get Raymond James in here possibly again, and talk about the finance end of it, because I'm not sure we're in agreement yet. And I think there's some options and things to look at that might help us make a decision from a finance standpoint. So I'm looking at making this decision the first board meeting in November with some additional information from Raymond James, Karen Hall. If the board's okay with that, I don't think we're ready yet to commit to something at this point.
So I've asked them to run some more numbers, and I do have those, and we can ask them to come back out again to the regular meeting if they're available, just to talk about it further.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to just address the elephant in the room, because frankly, I'm tired of beating around the bush with it. We cannot make a decision on this until the teacher's contract is finalized. I'm just going to say it that way. I'm not going to say anything else, but I don't think we can in good conscience give recommendation to our very capable architects, have them spend their valuable billable time drilling down on an option that we're not yet certain that we can afford. So I would recommend that we can certainly listen to the presentation, but I would recommend that we forego any decision until after we have an agreement with the faculty.
Yeah, Mr. Keener, I was thinking the exact same thing, that this is tough for me, knowing that one of our largest expenses is still unsettled. And so I'm struggling to want to commit to anything related to this until we have some solid information there, because it will fundamentally impact my decision.
And I don't disagree with that either. There's some, but the teacher's contract, as well as there's some other financial implications that I want the board to look at and understand, working with Mrs. Hall and our bonds people.
We also haven't, the stadium, we haven't really looked at, because this is a long-term commitment. We haven't looked at the stadium. We haven't looked at Lansville Elementary. So those are other things that till we decide what that looks like, I don't see how we can move forward with this plan.
You mean Centerville Elementary?
Sorry, Centerville Elementary.
I think we need to hear out Mr. Kelly though and let him go through his presentation.
We definitely hear the presentation. but I'm
Yeah.
just saying, like,
He sat in a traffic jam to get here. I think
Yeah.
that's what we do to listen.
So I think we need to hear you out. We could talk about this all night, but we need to let you get through your presentation. We have some decisions to make and some things that are outstanding for us. I think the only thing we need to understand is, can we move a little slower with this? Because we might have to.
That's
I think-
perfectly fine.
I think the good thing is, if you look later, they trimmed some costs off, which could help us as we look at some of these options. So I'll be interested to see.
Yes, building planning and fiscal planning go hand in hand.
Gotcha.
So it's absolutely right, and you're entirely focused on the right thing to make sure, hey, this is what's best for our building and our students, but this is also what's best financially as well. They absolutely are tied in together. So again, just trying to make our commitments from original. If we want to slow things down or taking a little break, obviously, focusing on the financial end of that is absolutely where you guys should be looking at. So we'll show tonight, again, those the goals that we had of any improvement option, and then kind of regurgitate a little bit of what we had talked about last time about how to kind of judge those decisions. I think the newer thing tonight is that Franklin replacement option. And again, we just want to kind of update what we've done again with Mr. Bromsman and his team. In every one of those options, we have to make sure that we are vetting that through the high school to make sure that it works. So we want to be able to say, yes, this is something that would work. And then be able to bring that to you to say, all right, where are we with scope and budget certainly. So this slide was just talking again about, the goals of the high school, understanding that there's a lot of fixing up of the existing building that needs to be done, whatever portions remain. There's a pretty significant amount of work there. And then the goal, focusing on the goal of improving the educational environment as well, understanding some of those classrooms existing are small, understanding that there's an idea of kind of moving STEM and STEAM and further directions that, again, limited space is creating some limits on how that can be expanded, and always a focus on safety and security, not only inside the building, but outside as well. So as we mentioned, we always kind of advise that there's 4 criteria to look at as you're looking through all of these options. The educational outcome, how have we improved education? The operational outcome, how have we improved the energy efficiency of the building? How that's going to operate, the trust we have that the heat will come on and every winter when it's needed. Disruption during construction. I mean, all of these projects are going to have some sort of major construction milestones to them. What does life look like on campus while that is being constructed? And, obviously, as we stated earlier, the cost implications of each option as well. So some updated numbers. We're kind of jumping to the end before we get into the specifics. We kind of looked at the highest option of knock everything down and start over, down to the lowest option of renovate the existing building in kind, meaning if there's a wall there now, that's the wall that remains. But new roofs, new HVAC, new plumbing, fixing all of the things in the existing building that are needed to be fixed. The 2 in the middle, then, as I mentioned, the replace Franklin option, and then the option of taking what you have now and expanding that. That did knock down a few walls and do a few extra things along in the middle. Some of the budget updated results come from some recent bid results that not only we've been a part of, but Fidavia and their team have seen as well. There's several new buildings that have opened in the last month, and some renovated buildings that have opened bids in the last month as well. So the good news is a lot of the screaming how fast everything is getting more expensive is kind of leveled off. And I think that's some good news, certainly for mechanical, electrical, plumbing pieces. However, back-to-back hurricanes in Florida and the Carolinas. Carolina is pretty much where a lot of mechanical equipment on the East Coast is made. And a lot of that is underwater right now. So that has kind of affected the market a little bit as well. So some of the things that we have looked at here are again, coming from very recent bid numbers and estimate numbers. But an important point to make is that we're not making the building cheaper. We're trying to find ways to bring the cost down, but not doing that in a cheaper way, meaning we're cheapening the material or doing anything less durable or less of a quality than things should be. So again, some of the numbers coming down are, like I said, based on some estimates and bid results.
Mike, could you tell me, what were the previous numbers for all four options that you presented last?
The new construction option was up at like 180, or I'm sorry, 280. That was close. We've been tracking Pennsbury High School, which is a new high school at about 495,000 square feet, which
Okay.
is almost the same size of where you would be. Again, understanding
255.
they're at 268 right now.
Okay.
So it's kind of, if they're 268, they're in Bucks County, right outside of Philly. You look at, again, the cost of the equipment is the same. Whatever air conditioning system they buy is going to cost you the same. It's the labor rates that would be a little less expensive. So that's where we were using some numbers there. Now, those numbers do include adding a new baseball field and a new softball field. So there are some additions there for you guys that kind of brought it to that number. Again, similarly, we're out to bid with Pleasant Valley, that's the building that's 380,000 square feet heated by coal. So that's getting completely redone. Those bids come in next month, but we had some updated estimates on that, which kind of, affected some of the renovation and expansion numbers there.
I believe the hybrid was 231. Am I remembering that right?
I think the replaced Franklin was 230 something. So again, all those things came down a little bit.
Okay.
And we were also able to kind of shrink down to 300,000 square feet. The replaced Franklin versus being about 310, 315. So working with Bill and his staff there, we were able to kind of go, all right, we can squeeze this down a little bit. What more can we take out and try to get that down to a reasonable budget there. So again, kind of the step-by-step piece of that we thought is kind of the top of the number and the bottom of the number there.
The renovate and expand existing school, do you remember what that estimate was? Right.
That was close to 181.
So the last two didn't change, but the top two did.
The main things that changed last time are more of the new construction numbers.
Okay.
Coming down a little bit, seeing some of, again, between Pennsbury, Coatesville just opened, that's a new elementary school. That was 415-ish a square foot with reduced site cost. So that was less than what we were showing before.
So these hurricanes, they're going to impact equipment and supplies. But the reality is, if we would approve this in early 2025, we wouldn't be purchasing that stuff till probably the design's going to refresh my memory on the schedule.
So even if you said, we'd love it, go tonight. You're not opening bids or going out to bid till probably January of 2026. So you've got, presidential election next week and all kinds of other things. And who knows what kind of weather we're going to get between then and now. But that's our job between us and Pedavy to be able to kind of regulate those things as things kind of go up and down, to make sure we're staying on whatever budget you hold to, that's the budget we hold to. So if construction prices rise, great. We have to find a way to reduce the size of the building or bring things down to stay on budget there. So between our two groups, we are bidding a lot of schools. So we can kind of see that, month to month in real time if suddenly something gets out of hand and goes up. So again, between then and now, again, presidential election tends to be kind of a big deal at times. We'll see what that affects, either going up or going down. The good news is that kind of 15-20% increase over the last 2 years has definitely leveled off.
Thank you.
So again, just kind of the breakdown of how we got to the 131 with the renovate only. Again, we're trying to throw a pretty robust number at the cost of the renovation of both wings, Franklin and Buchanan. Contingency costs and soft costs and furniture. So in every budget, it is brand new furniture and brand new technology throughout. In every budget, we're creating, contingencies for those. Especially in renovations, those contingencies tend to be higher because now you're opening up old walls and we find something and go, oh, that doesn't look safe. Let's fix that. So we always want to make sure that there's a hefty amount of money set aside. So our budgets in these things are always maximum. We're trying to be very, very conservative with those so that we're not going high and always coming in a little under. So those contingency numbers are there for protection, but certainly not to spend all of that. In any given messy renovation, maybe you spend half of that. But it's also there in case there's some major undiscovered things that may occur along the way. So this was the breakdown of the existing school. The next slide was the breakdown of
I'm
conceptual, looking at a new building. So good.
I mean, if you could go back to the last slide. So this is for the complete renovation that you identified in one of the early ones. If we did just what I would call the mission critical things, with just the steam plant, just the roof, and nothing else, ballpark, what would that be?
The roof is very easy to quantify. The roof is very easy to quantify. Just the steam plant tips over a lot of dominoes. So just the steam plant means you need a completely new HVAC system. Where does that go? How does that tie into the existing system? That system is old and dated. That needs to be replaced. The electric power in the building is not adequate to bring in air conditioning and all of the additional load to that. So the roof we can quantify. The HVAC would be 2/3 of that number because of what it tips over. Again, you're going to be up in the ceilings of every classroom. We're not going to put back the same ceiling. We're not going to put back the same fluorescent lighting. So we're going to go with LED lighting. So in any renovation, there's a lot of choices. So if you said we want to renovate everything, but you have to be under 100 million. Okay, there's things to do there. It's just that scope gets a lot smaller. We're not moving walls anywhere. The lockers stay the way they are. We're not painting this area. You could probably get the HVAC system in there. But that's kind of it at that point. Because that tipping point of get me off steam requires a lot of other things. All of those things can kind of be broken down if that was the mandate coming back. That's why I was saying those two things are very different.
Understood. Thank you.
So in the new building, you can see there, we're using, about $400 a square foot and 10% per site. That's where the number really came down from the last time we were looking at. Again, when the project's larger, the amount of soft cost is smaller. And again, we're still holding that $5 million number for furniture and technology. So these are the ceiling and the floor. Most expensive, least expensive. So to keep going, and kind of go through these a little bit. We talked before about the concepts of taking the existing building and adding to it in 2 spots. The athletics and performing arts center entrance. Actually, this is still showing the admin front as well. So like a little bit of an add at the front of the building, but mainly that academic addition kind of in the middle where art is. This is everything you have now being renovated and getting a little larger. We had shown that, I know some of the existing plans have been kind of whited out for, security reasons in the board packet. But if we look at those spaces, and again, you look here at the cost of renovation is about the same, and the additional cost of going from 131 to 181 is a higher level of renovation in the existing building, and obviously adding where are 90, there it is. I was looking for the number, 96,000 square feet of additional space onto that existing building. So this is an axon from the outside, and if you go back and do it again, you can kind of see there's existing, there's the baseball field, boom, just like that. You snap your fingers and the 2 additions are there. So you can see the majority of the new building, and then where the 2 additions would be. They wouldn't be all white like that. But that's the locations of where those could be. The baseball field gets relocated and the parking lot is moved over to that space. So that was a security improvement to move that over. So again, the images here kind of whited out to protect the existing floor plans, but you can see the 2 areas where we were building additions. And I think we had kind of talked about that last time. It provides, and in this image here, you can see in the lower, no, you're good, sorry. Well, all right. On the left there, you can see the what would be essentially the new public entrance going into a gym event or a performing arts event. What's nice here is all of that parking can happen in one big giant parking lot. Everybody goes in. If you're going to basketball, you go to the right. If I'm going to see a show, I go to the left. and kind of provides that central lobby accessible, handicap accessible, to the rest of the building. We had a lot of performing arts and things like that in that 3-story addition that would link to the existing Buchanan wing. And then the arts wing that's kind of up the hill a little bit is a 2-story addition that links to the existing Buchanan wing. So we were adding some needed space. We were also helping with circulation in the building. A lot of the corridors now kind of end in dead end. So that was a bit of a option that we had shared with you last time. So that's what the add to the existing building looks like. We want to focus a little bit more tonight on the other option, which was looking at the original Franklin wing, which has the old auditorium, has the old gym. It also has the rather, well, not new, but newer than Franklin cafeteria too. If that's the line that we draw and say everything above that is what we're taking down, so essentially half of what we had to renovate before, which is about $54 million worth of renovation, we're going to take that instead and put that into new construction, and add on to the newer Buchanan wing, even though the newer part still has some components from the 60s and 70s, but it certainly has the gym and the 90s performing arts center. So this option, if you dive into the plan here, okay, right, the construction cost of that, you can see we're building 300,000 square feet of new versus 90,000 square feet. So this is significantly larger and more new. It kind of goes to the idea of, you know, a dollar invested in new is maybe a smarter dollar than putting into something that's already 75 years old. So this increases the amount of new that we have. It decreases the overall size of the building when you're done. You actually have less building to heat and cool because the new addition is going to be very compact and a little bit more energy efficient there. And with contingencies and soft costs, and again, that same $5 million line item for furniture, we were budgeting about $211 million for this option. So same axon from the outside. This is what it looks like if you were up in a drone on, that's Kaufman Road on the bottom of the screen there. So if you click to the next, that's a lot of new. If you remember the image that we did the last time we did this, it was kind of the existing building with 2 little whites. This is a lot of white. This is a lot of new building with essentially Buchanan on the left. I think the next image is from the existing Franklin side. So this is your existing, you can see the white box there is the steam plant. So if you go to the next image here, that's a lot more parking lot. And again, a lot more new building. The little bit of white on the right is kind of the Band-Aid that goes over where we tear down Franklin from Buchanan. We build back a little bit of an addition there. But you're about 65% of the school now is brand new. And the remaining part of the school is Buchanan, which is in good shape, needs a new roof, needs HVAC, but it's double-loaded corridors of classrooms. It's not, you know, angled walls and angled walls and angled walls. It has the gym, it has the performing arts center, it has a lot of the science classrooms, which tend to be a little bit more expensive to build. So it has some of the things that we would choose, we would put on the list of things that are expensive to rebuild. If we can keep that and be $40 million less than knocking everything down and starting over, maybe this is an option to consider. So if you go to this plan here, and again, on the left, we're kind of covering up Franklin there too, or I'm sorry, Buchanan there as an existing building. You can see the Performing Arts Center kind of sneaking out on the left there, but a main entrance coming in from the Franklin side, a 3-story building. This all lines up perfectly with Buchanan as it goes 3 stories, so does Buchanan. There's a lot of straight circulation now, a lot of circulation that comes back on itself, no dead end corridors anymore. In this option, we are showing a new competition gym. Your gym now is in good shape. And as we kind of looked at, well, if we take down Buchanan, we take down Franklin, what do we need to replace it with? Well, we need to replace the existing auxiliary gym. And we need a place for an additional space for wrestling and some multi-purpose use. So we said the existing gym now, the floor there is wooden and it's kind of shot. So we would have to replace that wooden floor anyway. Or we can cover it with a rubberized flooring to save costs. Take the top third of that and say, well, all right, you're going to be our wrestling room, our multi-purpose room. The 2/3 of the gym that's below that is now our auxiliary gym. Let's build a brand new gym. That gym would be about 8,000 square feet larger than your existing gym is now. Could hold 2,500 to 3,000. So a much larger facility there. We're gonna have to replace, like I said, the Ox gym and there was a need for a wrestling space anyway. So you could build 2 small spaces or possibly build, a much larger competition gym. This gym would be large and, really tremendous at the size of what it would be there. So you would still have that existing volume there on the left of the gyms, but the new gym on the right. To the right of that, we're showing the cafeteria and kitchen. Again, all of these things can kind of move over time. The left side may become the right side at some point as we manipulate these things, but working with Mr. Brossman, at least we know we have everything there that's needed. All new music. Music is now right next to the performing arts, which was one of their top concerns about renovating where they are now. Hey, I can make what you have now look better, but it's going to stay where it is. Here and taking Franklin down, we could move that to kind of the rear stage and hook that up kind of perfectly to the back of the stage there. We're showing administration on the lower right there. That could be the visitors' front door of the building. Coming in at that lower level, we've toyed with moving that upstairs if you go to the second floor. Possibly having the administration up on the second floor. You can see in a lot of the blue and light blue and dark blue, that's all the educational spaces on the second floor. And then you go up to the third floor, additional classrooms that we're essentially replacing from the Franklin wing as well. All of this is expanding the capacity of the building. Again, remember there's more students planned for 10 years from now. So we are in every option expanding the capacity of the school to be able to accept additional students there. But you can see even here again, we have a racetrack or a circular design on that third floor that is then linking back to the existing Buchanan floor there as well. So everything always has a kind of way to get back to the original or back to the main part of the building. So diving in again to that.
So the hybrid option would have the original Buchanan gym and the new gym. Would the new gym be bigger than the old Buchanan gym?
By a lot.
So it would be the premier gym for
Yes.
for the big games and stuff.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And that was, again, part of the program analysis that we've done, again, with your team over the last month. Okay, what are we taking down and what do we have to rebuild? So we made a list of everything we had to take down. And again, if we need an Ox gym and a wrestling room and the existing gym floor is shot anyway, well, let's just cover that floor, put in a rubberized floor there. That's still a very good athletic surface. Make that, which the gym's fine, but make that our auxiliary gym and come back. If we're going to build something, we can build it a little bit bigger and make that a real premier state-of-the-art, very large competition gym. We're talking about components of seating on 4 sides or 2 sides, a track that could go either around the whole thing or at least a sprint lane that could be accessed on the second floor. So there's a lot that we could do within that gym. What's nice is it lines up with all the other athletic spaces. So we still have that kind of athletic component to it. So if the varsity team is playing in the main gym and the JV team's playing in what would be the Ox gym, great. It's all the same door. We're all using the same, restrooms and locker rooms. It's very efficient. It's not like what you have now where you have your main gym and your Ox gym, 2 different buildings away.
Thank you. And just to reiterate, I asked you the last time, new construction, I asked you lifetime, you said ballpark 75 years, renovation, probably 25 years. Does that still sound ballpark right?
Yeah, I mean, if you, and you kind of look at that based on your mechanical equipment. Mechanical equipment will last about 25 years. Maybe you can stretch it a few more years than that, but 25 years from now, you're gonna have to redo all of your mechanical equipment again anyway. And you're left with a building again that's just not as thermal of a jacket on as you would if you were building a new building. So with modern energy codes and things like that, the new building is gonna last far longer for durability, but also as a much more energy efficient envelope for the building.
But Charles, just one of the things is no matter what, a new building, 25 years, you're replacing the roof, the mechanicals, and having to repaint the building. I mean, that's gonna be regardless of new or renovation.
However, you're gonna need to do it much sooner with the renovated Franklin than you will.
The
with,
roofs, roofs are the roofs, the air conditioners are air conditioners as far as the durability of it, period.
Yeah, I mean, it's like buying a new car, you're still gonna need an oil change. So there are gonna be things in a new building, to your point, and an old building that are gonna need continual maintenance. The difference is the older building is getting older as it's going. The cracks on the floor, some of the masonry repairs and things like that are just gonna get worse. So, again, you put a brand new engine into a really old car, that the body of that car is still only gonna last so long until it, just kind of rusts out and fades away. So that's where putting, a lot of money into a building that's already 75, 70 years old is as putting a Ferrari engine into a really, really old car there. So
the likelihood of renovating the old building is going to be much sooner, except for the roof. Versus new construction, you're not going to need to do something till 50, 75 years out, other than mechanical equipment and roof.
Right, and 25 years from now, you're still gonna have undersized classrooms in Franklin. You're still gonna have, just kind of some odd spaces and dead-end corridors and things that are just not functioning as well as they could in a newer building that's more focused on some of the 21st century curriculum that is being asked to serve today.
I think I've asked this last time. Did we get a definite about the structural integrity of the building? Foundation, walls, things like that of all the building?
Yeah, we know that the outside of the building is in need of several areas of masonry repair. There's nothing that we had seen that seems structurally worrisome. But again, cracks on the floor, cracks on the walls, those get bigger over time.
Sure.
Certainly anything on the outside is worrisome as well about water getting into the building too.
But I just look at there, we have plenty of buildings in this area, like the courthouse is 100 plus years old, right? Just because it's old doesn't mean it's not structural. I'm just looking at the structural integrity of it. The structural integrity, you can't build on sand.
Yeah, no, the existing Franklin is not going to fall down anytime soon. It's the question that's being posed is that where you want to invest money? Because at the end, it's still primarily the same layout, the same challenges educationally that they are having now. So we can clean it up and keep it from having any issues, especially since you're looking at a complete start over with your HVAC systems. This is when, as you should, and that's why you hired us as a study to go, all right, is this really where we want to be placing our money, and what are our other options? And so that's what these 4 options are showing. And again, this is that kind of list of, as we said, this was only meant to spark discussion. This is not an answer sheet. But it's kind of, okay, in the renovation scheme, how's the operational outcome? In the replacement scheme, how's the construction disruption outcome? So this, I thought, was a good thing just to kind of lead you guys with to kind of start that discussion. I think that's the last slide, right?
Again, the reality though, if we go with the renovation option, like renovation option, we go with that option, 25 years later, the next board's probably gonna have to do another renovation, whereas we go with new construction, it's probably not gonna be 25 years, other than the roof and the mechanical equipment.
Right, 25 years in the renovation option, there may be some people going, why'd they put so much money into this 25 years ago? 25 years in one where we're building more new, it's just, all right, that compressor's failing, we should fix that. And let's look at doing the roof area B, and just, it's the oil change at that point. It's not starting over. Again, that's the educational outcome column.
Right.
If there are
classroom size and-
educational, right, if there are educational challenges in your building, those are not being resolved by renovating the roof and putting a new coat of paint on it.
And I think, well, some of us expressed interest in the hybrid option. I think the kids are gonna have better classrooms, but they're also not gonna have to walk a mile to get from one class to another, like they might have to from the Franklin to the other end of the Buchanan.
Yeah, I think we're trying to compress all of that. Certainly having that where it's not dead end corridors, having that where the corridors are full of light as well, even if there is a little bit of a walk, the furthest point from one point to the other is not going to feel like it's a mile long. You're not going to have to go up a ramp to go back down a ramp, and all the some of the complexities that are in that existing building.
Could I ask you to speak specifically to two things, just because they're like on the forefront of my mind, definitely finances and students. So for finances, could you speak to the prevailing of wage? And I wrote it down so I didn't forget. Let me see. And where that gets us the most bang for our buck. And then can you also speak more in detail, because I know it was in that chart, to the disruption of students, almost like comparing. So the prevailing wage, what that means financially, and then impact and disruption to students, because that's what I'm thinking.
So in Pennsylvania, it's public money. It has to be publicly bid. So they put out and they say you have to take the lowest bidders. You also have to abide by prevailing wage rates, which are done by the county. So if you built the same building in Philadelphia, it's going to cost them more than it would here. Prevailing wage rates in Philly, in Bucks County, and that's what we were using the comparison with Pennsbury, is higher than it is here. I think we had looked at, I forget what county it is, but where Pleasant Valley is, which is north of Allentown, it's where 80 and 33 meet up. That had a very similar prevailing wage rate to you guys, a little bit further into the Poconos. That aligned a little bit more with where Lancaster is. So it's less, but it's not a lot less. So let's say half of your cost is the cost of materials. So that air conditioner is going to be the same price in Philadelphia as it is here. The installation of that's different. So the second half of the cost of a building is labor. And if labor is, say, 5 to 10% less expensive here than maybe it is closer to Philadelphia, that's where you're saving some money. So 10%, let's say 10% of labor, that's maybe a 5% reduction of overall construction cost here versus Philadelphia. And even if that's 10%, it's not half off, because you're still, again, the brick you buy from some shop in Pittsburgh is going to cost you the same as it is in Philly. It's the labor rates that are conducted by the state that'll say, Mr. Painter, you have to be paid this much money by the contractor.
And would compacting the square footage or the new square footage help bring that cost down?
No, the labor rates are set regardless. What you're going to pay a
But I mean,
painter,
working within that square footage, that can be moved around a little more.
I think the square footage would be, the less you do, the less it costs. So the expanding of the existing building costs less because we're only building 90,000 square feet versus 300,000 square feet. So anytime we're working on a construction project and somebody says, how do we reduce costs? Unfortunately, sometimes we just have to say, well, what do you want to cut? Because the building is just going to get smaller. So the amount of what you build or the amount of what you renovate is what really drives the cost of all of those things. Your cost per square foot will be a few dollars less than a Pennsbury because of the county that you're in versus the county that they're in. So that's prevailing wage. Unfortunately, it's kind of set by the state. So it really doesn't matter who the builder is, who the architect is. It's just kind of that's what the state sets as the labor rates.
Disruption to
students, sorry. So a renovation is because of the existing building, there's really no place to put students. So if we're going to renovate a wing of the building, those students have to move out. So one option is trailers. So you may see an area where they bring, I always think of Upper Dublin High School built a 2-story bank of trailers when they replaced their high school. It was kind of crazy. You would have an area, we would say 20 classrooms at a time we're going to renovate. So let's put 20 trailers someplace, coordinate that off, fence that off so that it's not part of the public. We make sure that the security is all there. But now kids are leaving that building and going into a trailer for math class, and then they leave and kind of come back. Meanwhile, there's a section of the building that's kind of closed off. We're doing something similar to that in Interboro High School right now. It's 4 summers and 3 academic years. We're going to build an addition, move kids there, renovate this portion, build it over there, move these guys there. It's a shuffle for 4 years. And as well as that is going, the electrical equipment did not show up on time for the beginning of this past summer. So we already skipped a phase. So one little thing can kind of set off. Well, now if we can't get phase 1 done, we can't go to phase 2. So that's the kind of disruption that you may find. So again, the more you build new, if we build a brand new building down the street in a park someplace, when there's no disruption at all. When it's done, everybody moves there. So in the hybrid option, we're building an area, the baseball field would move. You're going to cordon off that area. It's going to be a construction site for 2 years. But everybody's in Franklin and Buchanan. When that's done, we'll take all the Buchanan rooms and move them into the new building while kids are probably still in Franklin and the new building, while Buchanan gets renovated over, say, 6 months or so. And then when that's done, now you have the brand new school, you have Buchanan and new, and you take down Franklin. So that has less disruption than the first 2 options of renovate only or renovate and expand. With the expansion option, we have a couple of extra classrooms, so maybe we don't need modulars, but we're still going to have to shut down big portions of the building over, I would say that's at least 3 years, 4 summers, type of an exercise.
Thank you.
Sure.
Mike, if you could answer for me 2 questions, and hopefully I'll remember the second one because it just went out of my mind. About how long did you say for the, I'll call it option C or 3, the major, to get rid of Franklin, and about how long would that process take?
So if you think about building a 300,000 square foot building, that's going to take at least all of 2 years. So let's say that starts March of 26, would be done the summer of 28. During those summers as well, they might be doing some things in Buchanan to try to speed that up. But then I would say by the summer of 29, then Buchanan is ready to go. The new building's there. Franklin is down, but maybe the parking lot takes an extra 3 months to pave and get ready. The demo of a building takes a long time.
Okay.
So the kids would be in the new school by 2028, and then let's say the construction is completed by 2029.
Okay.
Versus building a brand new building, that would probably take just as long because that's going to be 200,000 square foot bigger. So that's going to take about 3 years to construct, and then another year plus to take all of this down to whatever comes here if a new building was built. The renovation scheme could also take 3 years because we can only do little things at a time.
Right.
So I don't know that you're saving any time by just renovating.
Right.
Assuming the renovation takes, is throughout the whole building and the steep plan.
And then my other question that I do remember is say you went with something that required banks of modulars or classroom space, is that cost of that built into the estimates that you're putting out there?
Yes, so that would be part of the soft
Okay.
cost. But that can be $3 million to rent trailers for 2 years, which would be the right thing to do to keep the kids safe, to keep them in an area that's secure and away from construction. But that's $3 million towards renting that you're not really gaining any, equity or anything out of that as well.
Just, if I correct me if I'm wrong, most renovation projects that end up with modulars at most schools, is that correct?
No,
In some
if
fashion.
you had room in the school, we could shift
No, I'm
those
saying
away.
generally a construction project at a school does end up with some sort of modulars. That's not abnormal.
It depends. No, it's not abnormal at all. If you're doing.
Abnormal, is it?
Right, if you
abnormal?
don't have extra space, then that's what occurs. That's the easiest way to do that. Versus other things we've done one where we kept ninth grade in the middle schools for a year, which was crazy, just to have some additional space. To kind of, again, you're rotating the contractors. You're gonna say, all right, 12 weeks, you get this part of the building, and then 12 weeks later, you get this part. So we got to move kids, move teachers mid-year, and things like that. So if I have to move out of my English class and I'm going to sit in a trailer for 2 years and then I'll move back, that at least I'm only moving twice versus moving, then moving, then moving, then moving. Yeah, it's not uncommon at all to have trailers. We try to avoid it because you're not gaining any cost to that, but having kids in a safe space away from construction is certainly, certainly a valuable thing to do.
Question I have, currently the PAC has pumps in it to keep it from flooding, especially with the hybrid option. What guarantee do we have that you're not going to dig down there and find out that you can't really do this?
Yeah, we had talked about this last time.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, you tell them what you would do to prevent that.
The very first thing we're gonna do would be to test those areas. So again, if this was proceeded and you said, yeah, I think this is an option we want to proceed, the very first thing is to look at soil borings, like what's the structural capacity of the soil underneath there, and water infiltration as well. Are there sinkholes? Are there pockets of water? Do we hit a creek that no one knew was down there? To make sure that the soil of everything is solid in which to build on. Then waterproofing the outside of the building to make sure, and really anything that goes along the PAC to make sure that nothing gets into anything that would be subsurface. I don't know that we're showing anything subsurface right now, like a basement space. But anything that would be down there, you'd certainly want to make sure that you're waterproofing with proper drainage. But testing all of that comes first.
Which they obviously didn't do when they did the PAC, because we don't want to build a partial new high school and have a whole bunch of water where we're pumping water out of it like we are the PAC. So that would be something that would be screened before we move ahead.
Wasn't that they knew that, which is why they put in the pumps before PAC was built?
Yeah, I think they did know that. And if you look at the new building, it's close to the PAC. It's probably gonna be the same aquifer underneath there.
Yeah,
I would think.
Well, that's no guarantee. I mean, my person 3 doors down from me is pumping water all the time, and I'm never pumping water. So we will hopefully our rabbit foot helps it out there. So.
And since we're building right up against the PAC as well, I mean, there can be some mitigation issues there as well, and say, hey, here's where that's happening, so let's fix that.
Any other questions?
So one of the questions that has been asked to me, and I know, Mike, you and I have talked about this, is while we're talking about the high school here, we have talked about other things like stadium and CES particularly. Would you just be able to share a little bit about what you shared with me? Because I think that's part of a larger facility conversation, even though we're talking about high school on one path, everything else on another, but all of these things still need to be in the board's mind from a long-term planning standpoint, because obviously you're not gonna do everything at once, but there needs to be a long-term plan to address the areas. But when it comes to CES, there's been some question around things with the work potentially that needs to be done, renovation, not renovation in the future, et cetera.
Yeah, so last month, John and Maddie did a good job of kind of showing all of the other things in the district. So when you talk about the stadium, that's a one-off cost. That's fixing the stadium, fixing the field house, adding restrooms. Those are all valid, good things to do. That's just kind of if that's a priority, go and do that. Here's what that costs. That sounds great. It's completely independent from any conversations at the high school. And it's just kind of part of that planning of things that you guys were looking at last month. When it comes to Centerville, the question becomes, it's kind of a mini version of this. Do we want to sink a whole bunch of money into an older building that goes up and down and left and right and has some inherent design and layout issues that not necessarily would be fixed by putting on a new roof and putting on new air conditioning and things like that? So you come down to your options. You can replace that building. Take it down, build a new one. The second option, now the challenge there is it is very hard, if not impossible, to build a small elementary school in Pennsylvania. This will get into prevailing wage rates. There's another thing called Act 34, which limits what you can spend in a school. The unintended consequence is it also doesn't let you build anything small. So we're working with another school district right now that has two schools at about 375 each. They want to replace them both. You can't. So they're going to build one at 750 students because Act 34 limits how much you can spend, and the only way it allows you to spend money is by adding more kids. And you have to have about 600, 700 kids before you have enough Act 34 credits to be able to build the building. So you can thank the people that made that law in 1972. So that would be a challenge to straight up replace that just because of the amount of kids anyway. But besides that point, another option, as you guys are looking at issues with middle school and just the structure of what you have, the half-day kindergarten through sixth, you could move sixth grade into the middle school, adding additions onto both those schools. Both of those schools, according to the capacity study, have a little bit of room. So there, you might not have to build classrooms for the entire sixth grade, maybe half or 2/3, because there is a little bit of space in both of those schools. So by adding some work onto the middle school, now you move sixth grade in there, everybody else goes to half day to fifth grade, maybe even full day to fifth grade, and you'd be redistricting at that point by then closing Centerville. That would be another option to look at as well. Obviously, anytime you're closing a school and redistricting, there's some emotions involved and things like that you'd have to kind of look at and take into play. But if the value of that is moving sixth grade to the middle school, if the value of that is reducing one additional building that you have to heat and cool and pay a principal to be a principal, those are the things for you guys to kind of contemplate there. But in my experience, that's been the options. You renovate, but you're gonna have that same conversation. You replace, or you find a way to kind of restructure some grades to shuffle around so that maybe you don't have to replace the building.
Sounds like we need to do some more analysis there and look at the different options.
Yes.
And this may be more of the Fadavias, what's the structural issues with that school? I know take the small classrooms, take it outdated, but what's the actual structural? I know it's the roof, the air conditioning, and then there's some wall work that needs to be done, some masonry work. Other than that structural stuff, what is actually wrong with the building?
You come to the mic, I can't hear you.
It's the bones itself. It needs, roof, there's significant masonry repair, HVAC systems complete, electrical systems complete. And we've had a few engineers go through and look at it. And to Mike's point, even putting all that money in, you have classrooms, you have the hallway set up. So
What's the matter with the electrical system? Is it the input coming in, or is it the whole building needs to be rewired?
well, it's ultimately it's the age of the service. You're at a point where you can't get parts, you can't get breakers, when the service gets that old.
Okay, so the electrical room needs to replace, not the whole electrical system in the building.
Well, I think because of the age of it, they would recommend replacing all the wiring. Yeah.
Okay. Does it have ground? I mean, is it ground wired? Is it knob and tube, or is it ground wire?
Oh, no, it's not knob and tube. It's not quite that old.
Somewhere in all this conversation to replace the HVAC, I think in the high school, you said the high school didn't have the capacity for that. Is that the same thing with Centerville? That's why you had to replace.
Is that air conditioned now?
Yes.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
If it is air conditioned, now that's always the challenge when you're adding air conditioning into a space that doesn't have it. So there's a lot of parts of the high school that don't. So now I'm adding a new thing, and you can bring in the most energy efficient new thing, but air conditioning is a big consumer of power. So that's usually the tipping point to replace all of the electricity. So if that,
Right.
if the
Mhm.
service coming into the building at Centerville is enough to run the air conditioning they have there, it may be all the components and pieces, to John's point, the switch gear, the panels and all that other
Sure.
stuff, which is still money.
Mhm.
But it's maybe the service is adequate.
Okay.
So it sounds to me like CES, Centerville Elementary, is almost a more urgent priority than the high school right now. Based on.
Would you comment on that? Because I don't think that's a correct statement.
I don't know that, I wouldn't give a priority to that. I think.
I don't hear people saying that it has an electrical system that's failing. Or that, I mean, or that needs to be replaced and.
We
I
have
mean,
a heating
the
system. We don't know if it's gonna
picture
turn on.
is That Centerville is downright dangerous. I mean, it was.
No, I'm
That's
sorry
not-
if I implied it's failing. It's not failing at all. It just would need to be upgraded as you upgrade newer equipment.
Yeah, it's just, you're.
So is this a needs to have or a nice to have?
Middle of the road.
It's not falling down
And
tomorrow.
I'd like to, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to hear from the engineer. Is this a must have or a nice to have?
I think it comes down to the bigger picture that your maintenance costs increase over time as the building gets older and more systems fail. So there's a point where you stop and go, okay, does it make sense for me to continue to put good money after bad?
And-
At what point do you draw that line? And I think that's been the struggle with Centerville is we feel like that line is probably pretty close.
Okay, so you're saying it's a nice to have, not a must have, then?
So I guess to answer your question that way, yeah, it would be, it would make more sense from a financial standpoint if the money was present to look at doing something more significant there, rather than just continuing to put Band-Aids, the constant roof repairs, system repairs.
Thank you.
Mike's, but if you were comparing the high school to Centerville, which one would you say needs more urgent need? What is the more urgent need?
I think that's Papa Bear and really Little Baby Bear. So you have similar issues at both. They are larger at the high school because it's a larger building with more kids in it. I think there's components, to John's point, that needs to be fixed and things that are outdated at Centerville. You're running the high school on steam, which is more of a concern, because if that goes down, now all of a sudden you don't have heat. You saw the pipe collapse a few years ago. So not trying to play favorites, but I think just because of that, the size of the high school, the amount of kids that are in it, and the system that you're running on being what I would consider to be more volatile than having to fix, maybe an older system that's happening at Centerville. I think the high school has, albeit more expensive, the larger need there.
Thank you.
This isn't a construction question. I'm looking at programs that we have, expansion programs, how many classrooms we need for those programs, what size they need to be. Somewhere in this conversation about Centerville, I believe kindergarten came up. Like if any of those, I know it's a financial thing, but in the end, we've got to be able to provide, do whatever we need to do to have enough space for different programs, like for whatever that is. So can Centerville expand? Does it have enough space for the programs? Or is it just, are the classrooms really crowded and there's no room for expanding programs?
I think there's some accessibility issues with Centerville, some areas of the building that wouldn't be considered handicap accessible. Now they could be made that way, but now you're spending money chasing to fix code problems. We could certainly take a look at that. And again, maybe the answer there is similar to here. It's a bit of a hybrid approach where there's a new front door and we add some classrooms that are accessible and take down a portion that's the least accessible. That's what I meant before about it's just the smaller version of the high school issue.
So what I think I'm hearing is we haven't really looked at Centerville to see, other than, oh, we need a roof, we need we need upgraded electrical system for the HVAC. But maybe we really haven't looked at the functional capacity for the education that takes place in that building. I
would
don't know
think
if I'm phrasing it the
administration-
right way or.
Like
Could answer that
programmatically,
question.
what's
Right.
happening, where I feel like the high school has really delved into that.
Exactly. So like this, like we're getting new science curriculum, for example, to comply with the new state guidelines. So what's that? Is there going to be an increase in space of what we're going to need for our 5th and 6th grade classes? Well, we need different kind of rooms, different laboratories. I don't know that we've looked at that for our and going all the way down. What to the kindergarten? I mean, I don't think we've looked at that for Centerville, and I'd like to know more about that, delving into what the facility needs are when we look at what we want the educational programs and looking to the future, that what we want. And I haven't thought this through, so I know I'm probably not making any sense at all, except I don't know that we know what we need in Centerville it's more than just replacing a roof. We're talking about educational programs. What's going to happen? Like, do we need our special needs area larger? Do we need, what do we, exactly what we need? I don't feel like we know what we need there, except, gosh, this building's old and crummy.
If I could interject, prior to COVID, the administration, I think there was some architecture help, looked at all the elementary schools and how we
Yes.
might have to shift some students, redistrict.
Mhm.
And Mike, I don't know if you want to comment on that. I think we
Isn't
looked
that
at all
what
the schools.
started this? That was part of what started all of this.
Right, and it never came to fruition in terms of the
Mhm.
projected students that were going to come at the elementary. And then
Right.
after COVID, the shift, when you looked at all the numbers, it was more
Mm-hmm.
evident at the high school level that we were going to see that influx of students. And to date, we have capacity in all of our elementary buildings.
Mhm.
I don't believe we have capacity to fully absorb an entire school based on all of the other programs and supports that we provide for our students. So when you look at the regular education classrooms, K to 6, look at art, music, phys ed, and PE, we have spaces there, but to take all of those students would be difficult when you layer on all the other layers of support that are provided for students, because it's not as easy as just saying, okay, well, we don't need this particular class or program because we have it here, because sometimes they're managed by caseloads and caseload numbers by the state. And then that would push us over and then needing more space and another individual. So those are things that we would have to kind of look at on a broader scale. It's possible to absorb some. I just don't know that it's possible to absorb all.
And I do remember those conversations, and I remember talking about the autism class. And did we need more? Where did we need it? And
that's
just
and
all
you're-
of those kind of issues. I don't feel like we have actually thought that through.
You're right. And there's times that we've had conversation about, and sometimes we don't have enough programming or space in the district. Therefore, we're contracting out, and some of our students are in educational placements outside of the district. And so we've looked at times where does it make sense to bring it back in the district from not only programming for our students to have them here at Hempfield, but also then a cost standpoint, when you look at the scale of those costs. So those are things that we look at programmatically year to year. The largest addition at this point would be anything if there's going to be a shift at any point with kindergarten. Other than that, programmatically, educationally, the spaces that we have will be sufficient because we have the ability to have large group rooms if kids need to go for the steel standards, as you talked about, Mrs. Johnson, in terms of what's coming. So those are things that we have to look at.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I
comments?
have one about Centerville Elementary School, back to that, not to keep going down that path because this is a high school night, but you had mentioned about the state regulation. I think you said it was Act 38,
Act 34.
34. Is that only for an entirely new construction, or does that apply to like say a hybrid, if you were gonna,
So Act 34 is triggered if you're building anything larger than 20% of the existing building. So in the, which is just, the process of it is essentially a meeting. The reason for it is that in the 70s, they didn't have Wi-Fi and social media, and the word wasn't getting out to the public as much when school districts were doing things. Nowadays, it's always everywhere. So when we have Act 34 meetings for a new building or an addition onto a school that's larger than 20%, it's usually like the 12th or 13th time we brought this to the board and to the public. But it's a state required act to officially notify the public. Even though, again, through social media and websites and just, as you should, kind of saying, hey, we're about to do something big here, you know, would you like to come out and hear about it? So it's nothing that costs money. It's just a thing that you have to do. Now, the challenge there is it, as I said, it limits what you can spend on a building based on how many kids you put in it.
okay.
So as soon as you build an elementary school and you have a library and a gym and a cafeteria, none of that gets credit. Administration, none of that gets credit. Only the classrooms do you get credit for. So you're only getting credit for the rooms where kids are in. So you have to have a lot of those rooms in order to build the credit to get to a point where you're allowed to build a certain amount of money that will be about what the cost of the building is.
But I guess just to
There-
reiterate, does that apply to only brand new construction from ground up, or does that apply to remodeling and hybrid construction?
Only if the addition is greater than 20%. So in the expansion piece, where we are adding the 2 additions, you would not need to do that. In the hybrid, where we're building 65% new, yes, we would have to do that there. Because half of that project would be renovation, we would easily be able to meet the Act 34 limits there, because it's a giant school with 3,000 kids in it.
No, I'm talking about the elementary.
Yeah, for the elementary school, that's the challenge there
Right.
is we could expand Centerville by 20%. Not a problem. If it's more than 20%, now you got to kind of look at that. And if you were trying to build a new 375 kid school, you probably couldn't. It would certainly have a gym, a cafetorium. You'd be very limited on how much you could build there to build a very small school. That's why the smallest school nowadays is 750 kids, just because you need more kids to raise the limit.
Well, not only that, it's inefficient because you need
True.
more common space when you build multiple schools with multiple cafeterias, multiple gyms. It creates a need for a lot more common space and the return on investment is less.
So there's ways to do those things. It's just, following within all the rules of that. So, if you were looking to replace that building, it may want to be in conjunction to something else to get it to the mass that it could do that.
Okay.
I'm going to be as bold as just to share some of my thoughts from this conversation. And I don't really have any questions, but in an ideal world, I would be looking at option 2 and 3, which are the 2 middle options, not the extreme options. One of those options being the better of the options for the high school. And when you start to add in Centerville Elementary School, just from my experience, it would be a wise idea for us to put a roof on that building, delay anything about 5 to 10 years, probably closer to 10 years, and look to redistrict that building and add on to some additional buildings that we have. So you get additional return on investment for that common space. That needs to be like a 10-year project. And then the high school, some of the space over at the stadium should be built into that middle space somewhere in between. I know that's a bold to share that, but that's really the direction in an ideal world that we should be looking. And that school should eventually be torn down. And I know somebody's going to be angry because I said that, and that should be redistricted. It's not large enough to build new. It's not in a good enough condition to completely renovate, but you're going to have to do a few things to it to get it to the 10 to 15 year mark so that this district can actually afford to do something else, because as you can see, some of these options are expensive.
I have a question. I saw Bill on the way in here and I said, oh, you're here tonight. Why are you here? And he goes, well, to answer any questions from the board. So my question to you is, if you were sitting in one of our seats, what questions should we be asking you?
Do these options meet our needs? Both, I'll just call them options B and C. Yes, they both meet our needs. They've done a wonderful job listening to us and providing the space and even working with us on, improving the flow in the building, which is a big piece. Both options B and C provide us with the classroom space. It tackles those STEM areas, the tech ed, art, FCS, business, like all those, I'll call them high interest areas are getting needed attention in both option B and C. It really, comes down to what's gonna be livable through. So I think Mike did a great job talking about, not just what do we get for our money, but how do we get there? Option C with, that, as he explained, is gonna be much more livable for our students through the construction. Option B is doable, but it's gonna be complicated and people are gonna have to move multiple times and maybe we'll use trailers, maybe we won't, we don't know. So I mean, when I look at it as a fellow resident and taxpayer, it kind of comes down to your, what's the value for your dollar?
And you're saying B and C.
But looking between those two, yes.
Okay, thank you.
I think the time value of money and money up front versus money later, depending on what option pick, is something we need to think about too. And I'm hoping to talk up some more about that at our next meeting, working with our bonds people and our administration.
Mr. Mayor, so I just want to add to Mr. Brossman, when we talk about the redesign to improve programs for the kids, to improve what they're getting, I'm concerned even with the B option, that there's a core of kids, a 3-year or 4-year core of kids where the wonderful programming that we have, that they'll miss out on some of that during that period of time. So I'm wondering if you can address what you see if we went with an option B without that new construction. How much do you see a loss of the ability to deliver the programming that they've been experiencing for
So-
that core kids, those core kids that are in there?
Sure. So in my conversations with Mike and his team on an option B, my best understanding, and Mike, jump in if I have this wrong, but we would most likely build the new parts first, which does include some additional classrooms. So then in terms of the renovating the existing portions, if you work on the Buchanan wing, they might start at the end near the PAC. And so they might do from like the office down to the PAC, but they're going to do all 3 floors. So we'd have to take all the kids in those classrooms and temporarily put them in the new classrooms. And that might last, what, a marking period, a semester?
Half a year, let's say.
Half a year. And then when that time period's up, then those teachers would go to their newly renovated rooms and then we'd move to the next section of the hallway and rinse, wash and repeat. I'm not, my understanding is for some of the tech ed areas, the science areas, the more lab type areas, they try to do some of those over the summer because those classrooms, you can't just move into, a standard classroom. So that work has to be done over the summer. So as he explained, that's what adds to the length of the renovation project. And so anytime you're adding to the length of the project, yes, that's one more graduating class that's going to be affected by the project. So hopefully our programming wouldn't be impacted too greatly, but that's
Other than being messy,
it would be
they could still go on.
somewhat messy, but we will find a way to make whatever work to the best of our ability.
Thank you.
All right, thank you everyone for your questions.
Mr. Mayor, so if I can just say, I want to thank Dr. Brossman for all the time that he has spent working with Mike and Ryan from KCBA. He's put a lot of time into making sure and through our bi-weekly meetings, making sure things continue to be updated and really taking that critical eye to look at from a programming standpoint and asking those questions. And what about this? And what about this? So Bill, I just want to thank you because you've done a great job bringing those ideas forward. And then I want to thank the team at large, everyone who's been part of this, particularly, also the Mike and Ryan from KCBA. It's been absolutely wonderful working with you. When they come to the meetings, they come prepared and they are bringing back the work that's been done over the last 2 weeks. And so this has been continuously moving. There has not been a stall in this process. So thank you for all the work that all of you have done.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. I appreciate your time and we'll obviously be in touch as we talked about our negotiations and other issues, but hoping to make a decision soon, but we're limited right now.
So can I just clarify, is there anything else that prior to the November meeting that from a board standpoint that you want to hear back from the KCBA team?
I would love to hear what the stadium's gonna cost us. 'Cause I
That
think
will be
that's-
coming.
We've been working on that. Yeah.
And I would
There's a
love-
lot of components to
Oh,
it.
absolutely.
And upgrades. So yeah, our team has been working on that and we'll have that information input for the next capital projects update.
Yeah, awesome. And I think the discussion for Centerville Elementary needs to continue as well, to come up with a plan. If it's a 5, like whatever it looks like, right? But we need to say yay or nay and then move on.
It's gonna be a 10 to 15 year probably for that, but it should be ongoing discussion so that there's preparation for that.
I think there's some options to analyze and administration can be a big part of that. What we do long-term with that building. Mike kind of talked about some things and Mike, you talked about some things, but we're not going to decide on that tomorrow, but I do agree with Justin's assertion. I think the high school is more critical, more students. I think resolve that first and do whatever we got to do to keep Centerville running.
First, I think we can possibly do two things at the same time, but also I don't want to see us stalled because it's been stalled. And whatever that looks like, whatever works the best for you and for the principals and working with the building committee, we've just got to keep moving. And at some point, it's like we do need to study Centerville. That was obvious. That's obvious. But at some point, how much more do we need to study and go ahead and make a decision?
There's only so much money in a certain period of time.
understand
So
that.
say I'm doing both, that's impossible.
Yeah, the unfortunate part
That's
is.
what I said, but
is
exactly.
our bonds are gonna be anywhere between, I think, 26 and 30 years. So whatever we take out now is gonna affect everything for the next.
Right.
Isn't that what it's 26 to 30 years, I think?
I
it is,
think
roughly.
we're roughly on a 22 to 23 year, but they could be,
Yeah.
we could be floating them longer to about 20.
It
Actually,
was in the presentation. It was 23 to 24 years that
For
the last,
Only for the
High-
$130 million option.
So my point was, I think we can do the high school and still plan and look at what we need for Centerville. And that financial option, of course, is always a key player in whatever we do next.
All right.
So you want financial advisors at the upcoming board meeting in November? If they're available? And then next capital update, we'll have things wrapped in with the stadium and some additional pieces, and then coming back at the November Building and Grounds meeting with kind of a recap of all of it. Everyone hearing?
Yeah.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Safe travels back.
I don't believe we have any buildings and grounds action items. So I believe we are done with our meeting for this evening, so.
We're gonna adjourn to an
Motion to adjourn to
Oh,
executive.
we're gonna
session.
adjourn to an executive session,
for collective bargaining.
collective bargaining. Can I have a motion for that?
Go ahead.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.